Vic and Bob, as in Vic Bruce and Bob Mortimer. Bob, Vic used to do his club-style singing, and that was one of his classics. But it kind of reminded me of that, and I thought, well, I wanted to do something. So this is a re-badge of the talk that I gave online for the Leeds Digital Festival, which I don't think Martin could make. And then I suggested that it might be a thing that I could do a quick zip through. So I work for Network Rail, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about the things that kind of I do, which are a little bit geeky or nerdy, I don't know how you look at it, which is around to do with data visualization. So I work in the operations, planning and interfaces space. And this was originally given on the Equinox and an idea of trying to make sense of open rail data. So, welcome. So, we're obviously trying to get you from a state of slightly squidded and confused. My name's Ian Deakin. I have a Twitter handle. I have an email, which is where I'm kind of trying to do this, and yeah, get in touch. So that was the kind of idea. So this was the thing. So blah blah blah. Our first speaker will talk to you about. There'll be an introduction. My early forays into data, followed by visualization and the joke, which is the global map of Wayne, which hopefully might get a better reaction than shouting down Teams. Then there's a bit of a discussion about some of the British rail data and some of the stuff I'm interested in, and then there will be a short Q&A, although this is kind of a 40-minute talk, so we probably might have to cut that a bit shorter. So anyway, it's not about Rosemary. So I have a friend who works in the Czech Railway who sent me a copy, both in Czech, of some songs that come from the play Rossum's Universal Robots, which is actually where the word robot comes from. So it's 1932, and in this they sing the praise of the timetable, which if you're working in the railway, is in fact the most perfect product of the human mind. Then we're talking about railways. There are also some kind of Easter eggs in here, so if you can spot pictures of Sheffield or Leeds or possibly York, then you're in luck. And so why do I do this? So this is Whale and not Rosemary. So I'm afraid I like a nice bit of Niccolo Machiavelli from time to time. He neglects what is to be done for what ought to be done sooner affects his ruin than his preservation. I'm kind of interested in pragmatism, so I'm trying to do things with what's there rather than waiting for the perfect being the enemy of the good. So, I don't know if you recognise that, but if you're ever, anyway, there's a park in Sheffield that I will come point you to the rather remarkable trees. Anyway, so it's my early forays. So where did I start? So I'd kind of been doing some stuff. I've been working in IT for a long time, and I thought it might be an idea to try and kind of sharpen up on the tools. So here are some of the things I do to get things done. And where it kind of started was I'd been doing sort of things with maps and struggling with the technology. And then I found this kind of post about roads named Garth. So what? So one of the things I was using, so data science, the command line. So I kind of came across this idea of awesome. So there's a chap called Jerome Johnson. So remember, this is maybe for more of a broader thing. So you might find that some of this is probably a bit general audience. But then I thought, okay, that's quite good. I mean, I do Linux. I've been doing Linux since pre-kernel 1, downloading stuff and sticking it on floppy disks and burning CDs at work and getting shouted at for stealing bandwidth. So I thought maybe I kind of do compiling X window anyway. So I thought maybe I'll try and use this and try and do something with this. And I thought, oh, okay, what can I do? And so I saw this post. So I've kind of met Stuart from ODI Leeds, Open Data Institute, and he'd done this visualization, which kind of tickled me because it turns out Leeds is a bit of a Garth hotspot. And why does that matter? Well, I happen to have spent certainly my teenage years in a very small village in mid-Wales, and my sister went to Irvine Valley County Primary School in a small village in mid-Wales called Garth. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So this brought upon a deep Welsh sense of hiraeth, mix of longing and yearning, nostalgia for a Wales that never existed. But where was Garth? So I looked at this map, and actually it's sort of there, but it isn't there, because actually Garth Road, which is the town, or 1,500 people, whatever that is, called Bill, so it's Garth Road. And actually Garth there, so I thought, where was Garth? But then it's called Party On. And the next question was, where's Wayne? So we're about to get onto the joke. There you go. That's where I live. So that's another picture of Sheffield. Let's move on to where I started building things. So,
Excellent.
exactly. Party on. So first things, the closest, because it's about Leeds, that is the closest Wayne to Leeds. Then there's apparently a Wayne somewhere in the middle of Poland. John Wayne, even. There's a lot of Wayne in America, but no fountains of Wayne. So, and finally, in tribute to the work of the Open Data Institute Leeds here, and there are hyperlinks to all of this stuff if you want to follow that through, I bring you the global map of Wayne, otherwise known as Wayne's World. I'm sorry, that is the joke. So moving on. So yeah, some stuff. It took me about 20 hours because I used to be a coder maybe back in the 90s. I'm not very good. Running Linux Mint. I used Open Data Street Map data from GeoFabric, some of the geospatial tools. I then wrote some JavaScript, which is terrible. Using the MySpotStock D3 library, and he kind of appears again. And I've posted the code and the links to GitHub, because that seemed to be the nice thing to do. If you're going to have a hobby, you might as well share with people, even if they ignore it. There you go. And this is actually taken from La Piscine in the Gardens, which is a gallery in Roubaix that I mentioned. Lucy seems to be quite interested in the fact that somebody who worked in railways occasionally goes to an art gallery. But anyway. So, British Rail data. And here is what I call the heron pointer. I just talk a bit about transport travel stats, National Electronic Sectional Appendix, rail electrification strategy, which is kind of some stuff I've done for a holiday kind of gig, annoying one. It stops me from talking to my family about the railways, which is probably a benefit for all of us. There we go. So here is actually, this is a Sheffield Easter egg. So there's a bridge over the railway station, which has got the original bridge marking that seems to be slowly fading away. And I think it's kind of, for me, a little bit about the problems with the data of the rail industry. We've got systems that we've run that consist from freight on a platform that was originally commissioned in 1973. And part of my day job is to try and work out a way of fixing that. But anyway, that's another conversation for another day. So here's a piece of work that we've been doing around what is it that you do with rail data. So I'm involved in a timetable technical strategy. And this is it, really. So you start off with some stuff that railway undertakings do, which is about stock, planning the stock, resource planning of crew. They come up with a set of bids. They then throw it over at our system operator or capacity planning team. They have a wrestle, see if they can get into the timetable, have an argument, they can't. And if they can, they publish it. Underpinning this, there needs to be a model, okay, which has a link node, a logical model of network with some capabilities like this tunnel's too small to fit that RA gauge 12 down through, please don't try. And this is also about trying to get system operators to tune net to deal with this. Then you've got access planning, we're going to take that track away from you. Then you've got people who work in operations, so route control, train control, and then finally, you have an argument at the end of this about whose fault it was that it all started going slowly and then trying to pay money. So that's kind of my day job. But I thought that was kind of, what is the real data for? It kind of does that. But it looks like this. Welcome to the CIF file format. Welcome to the MQ feeds of train movement data. Moving on. What lies beneath platform 5, Sheffield Station? The River Sheaf, I think.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so yeah, okay. So the public transport travel statistics, sectional appendix. Anyway, this is the, I don't know, normally the more sensible or serious part. So first thing that I kind of had to go at was just looking at some public transport travel statistics. So the DFT pulled this together. So I wanted to script this, but you kind of end up in this thing which you start entering into kind of different geography. So that map's based on the super output area, geographical areas. So they cut the country into groups of about 200 or 300 people for statistical analysis. So there's a lot in London, not so many in Mid Wales. And then you take that, and then they also publish some stuff about how long it takes to get between places. And there you go. That's the map of, if I wanted to get a bus or cycle or walk and get to Leeds, where can I get to in 30 minutes through to whatever 720 minutes is, across the country. And interestingly enough, because it's based around train stations, you can almost work out where the track goes. So I thought, this just took way too long. It takes about 180 minutes to run, which is also not good. But there are something like 120 stations in there, and you've got to draw 4 pictures for each, and then you've got to render them and turn them. So, and it's also run on a laptop that sits in that box there, which is a 2010 Lenovo. Oh, sorry. Having spoken about it, I'll show you the. There you go. That really is goes with me on my journeys. Anyway, so Mike Bostock, who writes the D3 library, actually did some articles about he did this as we kind of pulled that together. So I dumped some GeoJSON on top of JSON format, which I can go into details if you're interested, posted it on there, and it's published. So if I was good, I would have actually loaded it up, but so you can just click on the links here, and at some point this will hopefully work. Anyway, so we'll move on to that. So that was the first one I did. So there's a bit of a lag, so we'll see if I can actually get that to load. So the next one is, so again, because it's about Leeds, I don't know if you're aware of the sectional appendix. Yes, it's a joy. It's arguably electronic, it's PDF, but that's about as far as it goes. And it's kind of bane of quite a good. So, and it has the gauging tables and their pictures. So I kind of slid into a bit of a conversation. So this is kind of like a flat text. Unfortunately, the person who was also on the call on Wednesday was Liam Crozier, who works at Hull University in the logistics unit, who currently masters a lot of this data for a lot of the freight companies. So he's going, why, Will, did you do this? Well, because I want to see if I could do it, not the fact that I know, Liam, you can. So yes, there's either PDF files, you can download them every 6 months, and I thought it might be interesting to try and scrape that data and stick it in a load of spreadsheets. There's a geography model under there. It happens to be the same for the load books and a number of the ones. And it tells you about the maximum height and width of railway vehicles. And if you could take a model of the railway, you might be able to do something like Liam's done, but not pay him lots of money. No, so I can say that. But I'm kind of quite into this idea of open data, what's impossible to do for free. Maybe that's going to work for a government organisation. Anyway, and then I've got a thing about why PostScript is evil. PostScript is evil, PDF is evil. I've spent time working in printing. I used to do a lot of pre-posts for the other pages once the team there. And to try and actually I've actually had to grovel through the specific PostScript in the PDF to rip out the grey and yellow bits because it confuses the algorithm that does the table. So so 110RG, I just did script on, unzips it, removes that, and then suddenly it worked. Anyway, so I kind of had some fun and games with this stuff. Yes. The next one is rail electrification. So like I said, there's kind of like 4 little bits that I'm trying to keep you into half an hour. So there's a chap called Gary Kuhner. He's quite big in the world of OLE. And he posted something, because I kind of follow him on Twitter, like you do. And he said, if anyone has the experience of building an instance of OpenStreetMap, could you get in touch? And I'd kind of done some of this stuff. Oh yeah, the usual suspect. My daughter knitted that. So I don't have the technical skills. So having already played around with some of this data, I'd also worked out how I could draw Wayne. So why don't I give Gary a copy of all of the track in OpenStreetMap? And actually I managed to improve it, which I quite like. So rather than 36 gig and like an 8-hour run, I found that there's a chap called Jeff Boeing who produced an OpenStreetMap node module, again in Python. He's interested in active transport, so he does cycling maps and road maps, but actually by changing the parameters, you could actually take the same information out of Overpass API, which is their geocoding piece, and actually dealing with the extractive rail. And I was also asked if I could pull out the dual carriageways. So, and we will get onto this in a little bit about what I'm interested in doing with this stuff. Dumped it to a GeoJSON file, and again, you end up with an electric map. And for some reason, I don't seem to have managed to get any of these links to work. But if you give us a second, is that going to work? Yes, that'll fire up. There you go. And I mean, Gary and his team have gone through and have done quite a nice job of actually pulling out where there is black, which is no electrification, green, third or fourth rail, DC, and then OLE. And it's, I thought, okay, that's quite cool. I can't claim to have been particularly heavily involved in the rest of that stuff. My thing was very much just to kind of try and signpost them into the data. And there you go. There's Gold Melty in Berlin. It's not that far from the Deutsche Bahn headquarters, but anyway, my love grows. So this is kind of the next bit that I'm kind of interested in, which is about where do you want your railway to go? All right. And you probably wanted to go where people are and where there isn't currently a railway. And so I'm kind of quite interested in these ideas of where do people go now, where are the main roads, which is the point I was trying to make about before, and where are their problems? So there are kind of a whole stack of data that's available through the open data scheme, or through OpenStreetMaps or whatever. You can start building, I don't know, economic cases, start saying, where would a good railway go? But the first thing about it is, so one of the sets of data that I kind of pulled together is around trying to look at where the railway currently is and then drawing a distance map. So these are kind of like graduated in 0 to 5 kilometres. It's easier to do it as steps because it works better for the eye. And you can see that, if you're looking in Hornsey or certainly in parts of Lincolnshire, you've got a problem. But are there anybody there? Often said of Lincolnshire. Anyway, sorry, moving on. So you can then also take the census data that I've got. You can start drawing, and there is actually underneath this an interactive map that's available where you can actually look at where people live. So you take those super output areas, you take the population statistics, and you can actually work out what the density is approximately. And you kind of see, so there's Leeds. I'm going to say sort of Sheffield. You've got Manchester. You can start seeing where parts of the world are. And if you can bring those two together, you can start seeing where there are areas which are underserved by railways. There's also another set, which is that as part of the census, they ask you how you get to work. So unfortunately, that's not at that very fine grain output area. That's at the middle super output area, MSOA. And so this looks at what's going on within that area. So that's the kind of statistic for Leeds. There's an interactive map there where you can pick walking, cycling, or you could look at bus. And it's basically taking the data, and I even did like a little zoom function, which is me showing off my, what do you call it, JavaScript skills, or lack of. And this is the little super output area. So if we could have got a more granular level, unfortunately, you need to have been doing a research project and sign a whole series of NDAs with the ONS to get hold of this stuff. But you could start seeing, is there a circular flow of traffic within an urban area that would be useful? And you might need to have a tram. And if you're in Leeds, you probably would want a tram because they don't have any public transport other than buses. Anyway, moving on. So this is kind of where we get to, where my railway goes using census data. So station node location, so there is a source of data called the National Passenger Transport Nodes, NAPTAN, which has got every bus stop, it's got every tram stop, it's got ferries, it's got the whole lot. So you can pull that in and get locations of sort of fixed points in that. You can take the census data, super output area, you've got the travel flow, and then nerd alert, Python GeoPandas to create data sets in GeoJSON and Esri shape files and overlaying these. Where I've actually ran into some problems though, anyway, this is kind of like, that's Brockbank Road at the bottom, if you want to spot the lichen. So yeah, so I've kind of produced these. Where it gets difficult is that how do you actually get to a product that people can interact with? So, and the other thing about it is it would be useful if you were able to overlay these without using some quite sophisticated or expensive online tools. You've got a challenge around that. So yeah, if you look at that, I can just quickly give you the density map. Let's go there. This will break it, and then it kind of goes up. But there you go. There's a density map. So there's Scotland. When I click on that, it tells you it's running through. So there's some technical challenges which are probably slightly beyond my. I mean, I've got QGIS, so I can do this on my laptop, but that's not really opening up to the general public, and it's kind of about trying to democratize the data that we've got. Anyway, so there you go. I apologize, I think I've overrun, but that's sort of where I've got to. That's not far from where Julius Caesar allegedly landed in Kent. In Sandwich Bay. Anyway, oh yes, and by the way, that is the operating model that we're using for the operations of traffic management. So there you go, some of the data sets, some of the technology tools have been used, and any questions? If I can run a track, start there, run through there.
So it looks like Lucas, who is joining us remotely, has got a question. I have no idea if you're going to be able to ask Lucas. Are you available?
No, I was trying to do a clap one and I pressed the wrong button.
Did you click on it? You're going to have to ask a question now, Lucas.
God, okay.
I'm going to ask a question on Lucas's behalf then. You talked about a network rail network model. You've shown what's possible with the data that's out there. How feasible do you think it is that Network Rail would publish a network level model of all of the track?
It's almost like I asked, the money's in the process. There is currently a discussion as part of the overall, I mean, so network rail, so okay. I believe, my friend tells me, no, there's a discussion about trying to, as part of the, so Network Rail was in control periods and it gets quite a lot of money from the government. And as part of the control period 6, which is we're halfway through, it agreed that it would actually deal with some of the issues with the, that there was an initiative the DFT ran around open data. As part of that was agreed that they would publish a network model, which is a centerline track model with identified nodes. It has encoding, which has the actual location of the track itself, and a name that will be encoded in that. There's an internal model already available, and after 2 years of asking, hopefully before Christmas, I'm going to find something to touch. I'm going to go for the Italian touch metal, touch iron. There should be a copy of the centerline track model available under probably the government license, which is pretty unrestrictive, of where the track actually is. Part of the reason for sensitivity is about if it's wrong, would somebody try and sue the infrastructure manager in this case? And also it's got some stuff in there about the irons that aren't network rails. So it's got sidings and other bits which it needs operationally. You kind of needed to go around and ask everybody who owns that track for permission, or you should have actually been good if the DFT had just kind of a big stick and said, publish it, get on with it. So, and that's actually a big move on from the Ordnance Survey data, which has route information, which is 4 tracks, 1 line, 1 track, 1 line, which is kind of nice if you're trying to do big granular stuff, but if you're actually interested in working out routing of that. I'm also hoping that the fact that it has a common name for the track, it will be possible. And it's also got the, I mean, even if it's a random hex code, at least you'll then be able to link that into other stuff, like a sectional appendix, like any of the other systems we've got. Might be able to overload, I don't know, timing points or reporting points. But then that's very much getting into my day job. Okay, so thank you. Actually, I have a hat of truth. Although it's actually the old Veritas disk. So they gave me that as a freebie when I used to do Unix. So apparently people dig that. One of the problems we're going to have, for example, with implementation of European Train Control System for East Coast from King's Cross to Peterborough, which is the big £1.2 billion scary signalling renewal, and they're back, you know, that there's a problem with the rail industry with the fact a lot of signalling is going end of life. That's sort of seen as a way of moving on from the rather interesting implementation on the Cambrian line, which was great for the 4 trains a day or whatever it is, to actually trying to do it on a mixed network. And if that works, then suddenly you're going to end up with trying to glue it into HS2, trying to deal with the West Coast main line, and then going further north. So there's quite a lot of in-cab signalling discussions going on. And one of the barriers to that is what the hell do you with freight? And because you need to have accurate freight characteristics. There's been some movement on unit characteristics with R2, the RSSB platform. Consist application, as I sort of referenced, was developed in the late 60s and went live in the British Rail as TOPS in 1973 and has sort of rusted in there. So, okay, I'll be blunt. There's kind of a problem for Network Rail is we kind of don't, sorry if I'm going to put that hat on, we kind of don't care. It doesn't do a job that Network Rail really cares about. It wants some of the output. But because of privatisation, it was handed it as a bag of spanners. And so the reason why it's never kind of got moved forward is because there's not really an internal imperative, and the freight rail hasn't really kind of mastered up enough shouting power to get that one unjammed. I'm hoping that something like East Coast will actually cause a kick, and then we'll start just on picking the. So break weight calculations shouldn't be done in one system that was developed over 70 years ago. Anyway, sorry, that's a personal view.
Yeah.
Please don't take that as being anything other than that. There you go. Oh yes, I should have mentioned. So if you like the font, it's Rail Alphabet. And if you like the cover, it was International Time Blue.